I don't get a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're live.
I'm live? Wow, because it didn't say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 like it usually does. And so far, nobody's here. Oh, 2 people are here. Yay, we're all here together. Let's see. I will chit chat for a bit as we talk about, hi, Monica, how you doing? It's so great to have you in the gathering room. The gathering room is a different room every single week. That's what I like about it. Everybody knows to gather there. It's so cool. Monica's here. Dore, Leah, hello, darlings. Dora, how are you, honey? It's so good to see your face on the screen. Erica, Maureen, Kamala, Stacy, woohoo, Maruska, Maria, and look at you, you gorgeous. Emma and Dawn and Joyce. How are you all today? Welcome, welcome, welcome to the gathering room. I think we can start now. We've got people from Winnipeg, we've got people from South Africa, we've got people from Denver and British Columbia and all over, just as we always do. Come on in, everybody. Come in and sit down. There's room for everyone. I love that there's room for everyone, like here in my tiny little office. Do you guys watch, like, this is just while we're getting started. Do you watch, I watch an eagle's nest in Decorah, Idaho, and you can see how many people are watching, and it's just literally these eagles sitting on a nest, and then the eggs are there, and you're all excited, and then they sit on the eggs, then the chicks hatch. At any given time, there are like 50,000 people sitting with me in a tree in Decorah, Idaho, watching these eagles raise their chicks, and the eagles don't have to be bothered. I mean, we live in a time of miracles. How amazing to be born in this weird little cusp between the time when technology makes our lives easier and it hasn't destroyed the world. We're the luckiest generation in history, right? Okay, so today, I want to talk about something that you probably heard me say, but I think it bears saying again. I was reading through the manuscript of a friend's novel today. Awesome novel. And part of it involves this woman who has, it brings in Irish magic, Irish mythology. And of course, she doesn't believe any of it, but she is Irish. And the fact is, she has something, a magic in her that really has no explanation. And so she has to go back to Ireland to find the old people and those who remember to tell her what the mystery is that's going on inside her. And I thought, I love the book, first of all, but I also thought, you know, my friend is actually pulling her punches here with the magical part, because it's very hidden. It's very sort of tamped down. It's like, don't hate me because I'm writing about magic. And I said, dude, you know what? I think you should let it fly, because here's the deal. We are a culture where the mystery is suppressed. So this is the part you may have heard me say. And, you know, if you read Freudian theory, it's all about repression of sexuality and how that is the ultimate thing behind everything. Well, that, I think, was probably true for most of the people that Freud was working with, because his particular culture was very repressive of sexuality, which is a normal, powerful part of any human being's experience. Anytime you try to crush down normal human experience, it will fight back. So if you've ever been on a diet, you know what it's like, or tried to stop smoking or whatever, you know what it's like to white knuckle something and then have it like burst out. Well, that's what Freud was looking at in his society. But our society doesn't suppress sexuality in the same ways. It does suppress it in many ways, but not that restrictively. But what it does repress is magic, the mystery, the mystical. And it's even like, I got in trouble with a friend of mine using the word mystical, because there are 2 definitions in the dictionary. And one is the cheesy, stupid magic that people do, like in circus sideshows to take money from gullible people. And on the other side, it means the mystery, like the cloud of unknowing, as the 13th century author wrote about it. The process of enlightenment, the process of awakening, the process of seeing through the merely physical to something behind the merely physical that is operating on consciousness and that is unified and that has power beyond material power. We experience that just the way everyone in Freudian society was experiencing some kind of sexuality, whether it was total repression or whatever. Everybody experiences some of this. It's part of our nature, our reality. And we have these experiences, but just as my friend in her book was putting too little attention on the magic and too much on the non-magic, I think I get in trouble, even me, and this is my soapbox, all right? This is like my life's work. So much stuff happens to me that is utterly mysterious. And yet I just push it aside the way some mainstream scientists push aside the implications of quantum mechanics because it's too weird. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. That's just too weird. Things don't affect each other without touching each other. Well, yes, they do. And there's lots of evidence that it does. But mainstream scientists, because that doesn't fit the culture, will push that aside. So I was thinking how these magical things happen to me, and some are little and some are huge. But over and over and over again, I think I will never forget this. Like, life is not what they told me it was at Harvard, because they told me this couldn't happen, and by God, it happened. And these things occur, and as I said, some are little, some are big. But as I go on and I speak with people in the cultural parlance, I start putting very little attention on them and scooting them aside and being embarrassed to have them. And yet I hunger for them. I was hungering for them reading my friend's novel, and that's what the gathering room is all about. So what I want to do today is I sat with my friend and said, okay, I'm going to tell 3 or 4 magic stories of little things that happened. And I sat there and I couldn't remember any. And I'm telling you, you guys, I have an overabundance of this in my life compared to most people. And yet the cultural mindset is so strong that I just sort of go blind to what has happened. I forget that I'm living in a magical universe. Even though things happen, they're like, oh, and all that I can use to explain them so far from science's point of view is quantum mechanics. But I thought, so I couldn't remember. And then I remembered, oh, I remember weird things with electronics. So what happens, the brain, I don't know if you know this, the brain stores memories in little categories, just like a library where like all the biology is in one section and then the I don't know, computer science is in another section. And so related memories pop out as you access one. So what I was remembering is how it was when I was driving a car that had a GPS navigation system. And to work the GPS navigation system, you had to turn it off. You had to stop the car, first of all, because this was early adopter, and they didn't want you monkeying with it while you were driving and killing people. So you had to stop the car, put it in park, turn off the engine, then turn on the GPS system, and then program it laboriously with this ridiculous keyboard that didn't really work. Then after half an hour of programming, you'd press a button and it would start to talk to you in that dulcet female voice. Turn right, go forward, whatever. Nowadays, they're much better. In those days, this was primitive compared to what we have now. So I didn't use it very much, and it was turned off. But one day, as I was driving this car, I was doing a meditation that was about alertness. So you think that you don't do a meditation while you're driving. Well, this is a driving meditation. You are actually supposed to do it while you're in the car to make your alertness and calmness higher so that you're a better driver, and you can also get calm. So people think meditation means sleep. That's because our culture also suppresses 2 other things, stillness and sleep. We are like obsessed with always thinking, always going, always working, always doing, and that's nonsense as well. Anyway, we associate meditation with getting sleepy because we don't get enough sleep and we don't get enough meditation. I was doing neither in the car. I was meditating, but I was alert and I got deeply calm. And I was at a not a gas station, at a stoplight. And I just thought, wow, I can really let everything go. I mean, life is okay. I'm okay. Everything's good. And I heard this sound, pong, and then a voice said, "You have reached your destination." And I was like, what, who, what, where? I was alone in the car. There's someone talking to me. It took me about 30 seconds to realize that was the voice of the GPS system, but it was turned off. I had not turned it on. I had not programmed it. I had not said go. It never spoke before or after unless it was laboriously programmed. But for some reason in that deep meditative space, it decided to tell me, or something decided to tell me, you have reached your destination. So I was thinking about that. And then I thought about how probably hundreds of times, you guys, I have been in a coaching session, maybe in a hotel room. People used to fly in to work with me when I lived in Phoenix. And I'd go to their hotel rooms. Sometimes people would come. For a while, I worked out of my own house, but I'm talking about the hotels because I had no control over the electronics there. And what I can tell you is that when a client would get this deep break, like I would tell, we'd get to a place where they let go of a big burden, or they switched their thinking on something and came into a kind of alignment. The lights would turn on, the TV would turn on, a stereo would turn on, the clock would turn, things just would turn on. Sometimes they went off or they went poof and like light bulbs burned out and stuff. But that could happen randomly, like things burn out. But things don't just randomly turn on quite as frequently. And it wasn't like everything would turn on one thing. So it wasn't a power surge for the whole room. So then I was thinking about how I have a TV at my place where we do retreats sometimes for writers now, having to do with our Write into Light program. And this last, when did we do I think it was October, we had a group out, and there was a beautiful, wonderful woman there, a gorgeous writer, who has a son who has very, very severe birth defects. And I don't think he communicates in language at all. He's 7 or 8. Sorry if I'm getting this wrong, the details wrong. But I love this woman and I love her child. And we did some pretty intense work on him. She had written about him. And there was something about what if he wrote back to you and how might he express what you want to hear. And she said something like, he'd tell me I was doing a good enough job and that his life is good and that I can relax. And boing, the TV went on, this big television that we had that had barely been used at all and had never turned on before. It turned on. And we were like, oh, I think there's some kind of energy that's going into those things to turn them on. Couple more things. Well, I was sitting at dinner. I don't know if I told you this, but we were sitting at dinner and thinking about our friend Rhea, who at the time was dying of cancer and has now passed away. But we were talking about her at dinner, and in the other room there was a computer that was turned off. And on this computer, iTunes had never been used. But as we talked about this woman, we heard her voice coming from the other room. And she was singing a song, and it was a song that had been imported into iTunes because she was a singer-songwriter. And iTunes was off, the computer was off. We just sat there and ate and listened to Rhea's song come from a computer that was turned off, from an iTunes that was turned off. And then it went into another recording of me talking to her partner, which was on a different playlist. And like all this Rhea energy started flowing into our house as we talked about her. And we thought maybe she'd passed away already. But I think she was in that place where people actually sort of go back and forth between the worlds. But somehow it selected those tracks out of a program, an app that was turned off. And finally, then I'll start taking your questions. We have a labyrinth at my ranch here. And we have had to wire this place up. I don't know if you're getting good internet now because it has been quite difficult to get this ranch wired for internet because it's way, way out in the mountains, and we have to use all these gizmos, and you only get internet if you're in the house and only in certain rooms. But when people go way the hell out, like half a mile away, and walk to the center of this labyrinth, which is a medieval device used to put people in a state of deep meditation. I don't know how it does it. Something about the turning and the finding your way. I have no idea. I just know it's a very magical place, and people have seen all kinds of interesting things out there. 3 different people who didn't know each other told me they saw a barefoot woman sitting in a tree as they walked the labyrinth, and that became the basis of the character Diana in my novel, Diana herself, that woman in the tree. 3 different people. But one thing that happens fairly often is that people go into the center of this labyrinth after walking and getting into this deep meditative place. And in the center of the labyrinth, for some reason, their cell phone suddenly turns on and starts bringing in messages. It's like they've opened a portal, and it's in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by mountains. There's no way. There's just no way. And before the labyrinth was there, no, and usually you can't get signal there. So this is a tiny subcategory of magical experiences involving electronics. If I went off on a tangent of magical experiences related to animals, you'd get a whole nother bunch of stories, as you did if you read Finding Your Way in a Wild New World. If I went into a whole bunch of things around people who died, like Rhea, you'd get another one. It just, yeah, I'm thinking of all these stories now, but I'm not going to tell all of them. I'm going to get some questions going. So Jesse says, I want more magic. Are there things I can do daily to increase the amount of magic in my life? Honey, we are doing it right now. Everything grows in the light of attention. The magic is worked by consciousness, I believe, the consciousness that fills us with life and animates these funny things that just fall down and stop talking once consciousness leaves. And as we focus the consciousness of attention on anything, we increase the amount that we think about it. We therefore increase the amount that we observe it. And I think we actually increase the amount that it happens. But even if you just pay attention enough to start seeing it, you'll see that it happens literally every day. It is happening to you every day. And it's not about being credulous and thinking, you know, like I had one woman who said, I saw a dog on foot running. It was a magical sign. And I was like, okay. I mean, that's going a little too far. I'm fairly skeptical, believe it or not. I like things to test out. But when I pay attention, I find little magical things happening literally every single day. And when I take my attention off it, I simply start to believe that I live in a world without magic. It's all around us. So attention, 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 and then telling stories about it. Yay. Okay, so Linda says, question, as far as following signs, I think Jung said only follow it once it shows up 3 times. When do we know to take action based on the message that shows up? I don't believe that you should ever give away your agency to something that happens outside your sense of truth. This is what I think. If something strikes you 3 times and it really feels true, then definitely go with it. But if it only happens once and it's deeply, deeply, resonantly true, do that. If it happens 20 times but it feels spooky or icky, remember that if you give selective attention to something that's based on dysfunction, that can show up as well. So it's very common. One of the reasons we avoid magic is that people can take it the wrong direction, and they can get too obsessed with it and too credulous and give up their personal power to people who seem to do magical tricks. And in ancient Rome, the priests would actually make mechanisms that operated on things like water pressure, but the people would think it was magic, and then they'd do anything the priest said. Look for the magic and realize you are the magic. And when it comes to making decisions about your life, don't believe any magical thing unless it chimes with your sense of truth and it feels like love. It feels like truth. It feels like health. Because if you just go for anything that seems supernatural, one of the disadvantages of a culture that doesn't talk about it is we don't know how to discern. So the discernment happens in your sense of truth. And then the magic can be whatever it wants. So Nika says, but how do you tell the difference between delusions and real magic? Here's the thing. You don't abandon the scientific method because you believe that consciousness can do things that are beyond material understanding. You can bring the scientific method to your magic, which is what I've spent my whole life doing. I was at Harvard. I'd been there my whole adult life when I started having psychic experiences when I was pregnant with my son, Adam. But I was still studying to be a social scientist. And so I would see things that my then husband was seeing, and I would write them down. And then, by God, I would say, what did you see? And I would see if I got a hit rate, like, was I actually seeing what he was seeing? And the answer was yes. But sometimes, then I went a bit off the beam for a while. I started believing that everything, every little thing that came across my mind was real. And I started testing things like, I felt a friend should do X, Y, and Z, or Z, if you're not in Canada. And I would go tell them this. Oh, I'm so ashamed. And they'd be like, that doesn't feel right to me. And later I realized that I was projecting. It felt different because I was testing it out and believing, like, if somebody tells you the magic is going to work and it doesn't work, don't believe them anymore. If someone tells you there's magical stuff going on and it starts happening to you and it tests out as true, believe it. And you'll start to discern between things that are just your mind going off on speculation and imagination, which is important. We need to take the boundaries off our imaginations and let them fly. But we also need to know when we're just in magical thinking. So, for example, during that pregnancy, I thought, if this can happen, I can change my son into not having Down syndrome because he was diagnosed with Down syndrome. So I'm like, I'm having psychic experiences. There's magic afoot. I can do anything. I'm going to change him so he doesn't have Down syndrome. And let me tell you, I sat around like gritting my little teeth and clenching my little fists and doing anything, every magical religious practice I could come across to say, don't let my son have Down syndrome. And it was magical thinking. The magic doesn't take away our destiny. It lets us go through difficulty. But what happened is that when I gave into the magic, I suddenly realized that his Down syndrome could in itself be a kind of magic. That maybe his strangely, interestingly different brain could bring through more than mine could. When I was thinking about having childhood trauma, I was really bummed out reading childhood trauma permanently alters the brain. But then I thought, well, one of the experiences that I had was like feeling like I was outside my body, which is typical of somebody going through trauma. Maybe the way trauma changes the brain allows me to be less tied to the physical. Maybe that's a gift. So I came to see Down syndrome as a gift. I started to study cultures where they saw certain birth defects or epilepsy or whatever as gifts that make people more accessible to the spirit. And when I went there was a truth that was deep and transformative, and it pulled me away from my culture, but it opened me to a different way of understanding my own experience, so that instead of getting things the way I wanted them, I took things the way they were and saw why they were exactly the best thing that could happen. And when I changed my perspective that way, it was like putting on magic glasses. One of the things that happens is when you shift your worldview to accord with your own destiny, you are rewarded with storms of magic. It's one of the ways you know you're on track. Things may not be going the way you want them, and you may try to magical think them into something different. But then when you find the real magic, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to understand Down syndrome as a gift. Kablowie, you get all kinds of magic, and that's what's happened to me my whole life. Test it. So Amy asks, what do labyrinths do for us? I don't know. They've been used as a form of meditation. I'm struck by their resemblance to a brain. They're not like mazes where you find your way through. You can see the center, but you have to go through these odd labyrinthine paths to get there. There's something about walking these labyrinths that brings people into a brain state where they're conducive to magic. And I will tell you a quick story. I once had a group of seminar participants disappear and not come back. And 15 minutes later, we found them all in the center of the labyrinth, and some weird person was standing at the entrance to the labyrinth, waving arms. I thought it was a woman, and when I got close enough, I saw it was my son, Adam, who wasn't even involved in the seminar. He was standing at the opening of the labyrinth, and his arms were doing all these strange things. And I just sort of stood there and watched and waited till he was done. I mean, we'd never talked about it or anything. He finally put his arms down, and all the women who were in the center of the labyrinth got up and kind of walked around in a daze going, whoa, that was intense. They were all feeling lightheaded and stuff. And I said, Adam, what were you doing? And he said, I was using the labyrinth. And I said, how? And he said, well, you put energy into the ground. And as you put your energy into the ground, and then it turns, it goes double. And then it turns and it goes double. And it turns and it goes double. And then by the time you're in the middle, there's a lot of energy and you can do anything. And I was like, I would not have thought of that, but it makes sense. If you double the energy every time you reverse direction, by the time you get in there into the center of a labyrinth, you've built up quite a fund of whatever this energy is. That's the best I can tell you about how labyrinths work. I still don't know why. If y'all do, please post it on Facebook. I want to read it. But I don't know how. I don't know how. I know, though, that if science goes far enough, we'll figure it out. Okay, so Sherry says, Martha, is magic. What is there when we shift our perception out of what we think is our reality? Is it there and available there 24/7? Yes, it absolutely is. When you shift your perception out of what is reality, here's the key point, though. We don't want to just go off into madness. We don't want to hallucinate. So what you do is you shift your perception to accord with your heart. I was telling you guys last week, I think, that a shaman friend of mine said every reality is subjective, but when reality is seen with pure compassion, with the heart, that is the truest it gets. You know, the closest we can get to knowing what is real is to know through the eyes of compassion, absolute compassion. So if your reality is not compassionate, if the universe doesn't seem friendly, if things seem stacked against you, and it hurts, that pain, that emotional and spiritual suffering is what tells us to shift perception to a different worldview. You take off the depression glasses, which lie, and you put on the glasses that say, I am consciousness, walking through this reality in this apparent human form, and I am here to have this experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, not vice versa. And the glasses switch, and the way you know you've come home is that, yes, magical things happen, but your heart comes to a place of rest and comfort. That heart is your navigation. That heart tells you, okay, this perception is the one I want. And then the magic happens as a byproduct. I'm writing my book now, The Integrity Cleanse, where all I set out to do is be absolutely honest. And what I found is that when I did that, and I had no intention to have supernatural experiences, but the closer I get to my own integrity, the more I mind the truth in my heart and really shift my perceptions based on what feels wrong to compassion and what feels right to compassion, the more miracles occur. I kid you not. You want magic, just start feeling what you feel, knowing what you know, and doing what you really deeply want. That's the way to the magic. And it rings through all your senses, and the mind and the heart and the body and the spirit all line up. They're not at war with one another. This does not negate reason or logic or science. It's where reason and logic and science need to go with us. And our hearts and our bodies have been left out of the equation almost entirely. We're such a mind-based culture. So all of this just to say, shift your attention in the days for the next week. Let's all put our attention on the magic. What's happened to us in the past, what's happening to us right now, what will happen to us as the days go on. Just for the next 7 days, write down the magic. Let's put it on Facebook. I promise to. Let's talk about it more. Let's encourage it. Let's invite it. Let's not lose our minds. And just remember that it is setting out to live by heart and to tell the truth that really just ushers that in. And then we have to accept that our hearts need it and that the truth is that it is real. Okay, half an hour. We've come to the end. God, I miss you guys during the week. I just want to grab you and snuggle you all. It is delicious to be here with you. And the fact that we can do this is what I call the magical technology, so that the technologies of magic can spread through the world. I love you. I'm so grateful to you for showing up today. Mwah! I will see you next Saturday in the gathering room again. Thank you so, so much for being here. Mwah!